welcome. Welcome to our session on creating an industry-ready design portfolio. My name is Don Larson. I'm Program Director of the Media Design Master of Fine Arts degree, and with me we have Eric Rosenfeld, who is Program Director of Digital Arts and Design and Graphic Design, and we have Trista Hall, who's a Department Chair, and Peter Sotillo, who's a Course Director, and Elena Rogel, who's also a Course Director. We're pleased that you're here with us today, and what we're going to talk about is how you prepare yourself to go out into the industry and get a job with your portfolio. And this is a very interesting topic, and we were talking a little bit earlier. We all come from the days before we had our computers and our laptops, so we were walking around with those big cases with big boards. In fact, I'm from Chicago, and we used to see students walking up and down Michigan Avenue with these big portfolio cases, in the windy city, and they were blowing away. And we had this one student that was a little bit on the smaller side, and she's carrying around this giant, like 30 by 40 inch case, and the wind is blowing, and I thought she was going to sail away. And now, things are completely different, and where things now are digital, and a lot of times when you're applying for a position, the person that's going to be hiring is going to ask for a link to your portfolio. So you have to be prepared to be able to present it that way on its own. In those old days, we'd walk in with our work mounted on boards, and we could talk about it and kind of paste the presentation. Now it's completely different. So the design portfolio, the digital portfolio, really has to kind of stand on its own and speak for itself. And if it works, if it's effective, then you might get a call back to come in for an interview, and then you get to go into a little bit more detail. So today we're going to show you some examples of work that we think is effective, and I didn't pull any examples of things that we don't think are very good. I think we all know. And then after we show these, we'll talk about it a little bit, and feel free to ask questions at any time. We have a microphone we can pass around. If you want to stop us, that's okay, or we can wait to the end, that's fine. But these are a few examples, and some of them are from very top, especially the first one. I'm going to show you the list that's there on the screen. Shermayev, Geismar, and Haviv have been around for a long time, and they have some major brands, and I'm going to show you how they present those. And then some of these are our very own students who have graduated and now are out in the field, and so you can kind of see the differences between those. And my panel here, they're very esteemed. We've all been in positions where we've been on both sides, where we've had to go in and show our work to get jobs. And then we've also met, I think all of us have been art directors or creative directors, where we've had to look at potential applicants' portfolios as well. So we've seen a lot of work, and we have a pretty good sense of what works and what might not work. After I show you the examples, we're going to talk about personal branding, and Elena Rogel is going to take the mic and talk a little bit about the cover letter, resume, personal brand statement, okay?
How important writing is.
Yeah, Elena teaches writing, and she's also a designer, so that's fantastic. So anyway, let's start with Shermayev and Geismar. Excuse my awkwardness here, but hopefully this will work. And we go to their site, and as I scroll down, you can see a little bit of an introductory there. And as I scroll down, you'll see a lot of brands that you'll notice have been around for a very long time. And it kind of gives us a little bit of sense of what they do, right? Especially if you start recognizing some of these things. It's quite an array. And
Don, I'm going to interrupt for a second. I just want to point out that there's no splash screen or opening video things. I think we've gotten rid of those mostly on the web of opening flash animations, things like that. But notice it goes straight to the work, straight to a very simple statement, and so you can see what they're about, rather than you could lose somebody in that splash screen because they don't want to be bothered. So go ahead, sorry.
That's right. And what Eric was talking about, if you've opened up some of these, we do still see them sometimes. You'll see something animate. And the way that I'm going to I'm going to open up one of these panels. See, when you click on these, then it goes into the work. And really, this project, for the U.S. Open Tennis Championships, is really what they did is they designed the logo, okay? But the way they present it is really presenting the entire brand. So we're seeing it, and there's a little bit of a statement there that explains the project. And as we go down, we start to see how it applies to different media. And they're giving us the story as we go along. And if we are interested, we'll take the time to read it. A lot of people that are in a big hurry don't read it. They'll just skim right over it. So therefore, it has to work from a visual standpoint as well as a well-written standpoint, depending on who's going to be looking at it. Notice the quality of the photography. And then we start to get into some of the other applications. Looks like a money clip and a book, glasses. Tennis balls. Another little statement that's beautifully presented. Everything that they do, Shemaev and Geismar and Haviv, everything they do is clean, simple, and direct. Look at the animated logo. So it kind of gives you the story, and then it goes right into all the others. Let's look at one more. Anybody want to pick one out? Yell it out. What? PBS. A couple of us used to work for PBS. Okay, let's see what this is. I have no idea. The appliance and consumer electronics giant Beko is a significant presence around the world, particularly among the younger demographic. The visual identity for Beko can be seen on the jerseys and stadium signage for FC Barcelona, which it sponsors. Okay.
I'm going to jump in really quick and say, you might not have access to a world championship soccer team, to show off your work. I mean, some of us might not. So from a student perspective, it might seem a little daunting to be able to produce that level of work, but that's when you're graduating at the student level, you can prototype and you can make comps that look and have that feel. Yes, they're going to understand that, yes, that celebrity isn't endorsing, and you wouldn't use other celebrities in your work, but you can do it more on a smaller scale. You get together with your friends and put, take some photography with them and then incorporate your brand or your work into that photography. And even though it's not on such a big scale, you can still capture the emotion. You can capture the story involved with it. And don't feel like just because you're not working with your $100,000 photography budget that you can't produce the similar impact that you see something here.
And if I could add something as well, and one thing that I want you to really see is to kind of follow up and really define what it means by to create a story of what the brand is. They could have very simply just presented the logo, as you can see, and that has a certain street cred to it itself. But most importantly, in their portfolio, they want to show the logo in use. And that's what they call the macro design, meaning how does it look in its environment? How does it look on the tennis ball as a player is playing against how does it help set off the game and different elements? And if you notice, it's not just a logo on the banner. There's an entire brand that is a part of it. And that's what's part of your portfolio rather than just the simple element of the logo itself.
And earlier, as I was looking at these, let's look at this one for a second. This is kind of important too. We not only see all of the applications, but somewhere down here, I love those little motion graphics that they do. Somewhere down here we see kind of the early sketches. And sometimes, employers want to see how you think and the process that you go through. So these are very tight. These are actually fully rendered. And we encourage students to also show pencil sketches because that gives the employer the idea that you know how to think quickly and process things quickly, that you don't go right to the computer and start rendering before coming up with good ideas, right? But look at the way that they lay things out. It looks very natural and just very organic, yet very clean. And notice the system. You'll see NBC with all the color, and then they broke out all. So quickly you can get a snapshot of their system and seeing how things work. And look at that.
Hey Don, can I step in here for a second?
Please.
As adding to the sketches, and I teach the final portfolio class, and students sometimes get really nervous about putting their pencil sketches in because they think they have to be final rendered illustrations. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the process. So showing those sketches illustrates the process and tells us the story of your process. We're not looking at them, judging them on, oh, well, that's a terrible thumbnail. No, we want to see the process. We're not looking at them to be final rendered illustrations. So I think, keep that in mind. We want to see your roughs. They don't have to be final render. We're not even expecting that. You're not going for an illustrator position to be an illustrator. So I think a lot of times students get scared because, oh, well, they don't want to see my terrible thumbnail napkin sketch. I'm like, yes, I do. Because I'm not looking at it for its illustration accuracy. I'm looking at your journey to the final logo.
I was just going to share also is when it comes to showing your sketches, there are so many ways you can make a poor sketch look amazing. Like one, just running it through Photoshop and adjusting curves and levels and just cleaning it up a little bit look amazing. Or, one bad sketch might not look great, but 50 bad sketches looks tremendous. Like you should take a picture of your sketchbook at an angle with some nice lighting, maybe a Cabernet next to it, or a soda of something, and just create a little scene of your sketchbook, maybe your cute puppy in the background, and all of a sudden this is a hero shot for your portfolio, demonstrating all the sketches and ideas you had, and it's demonstrating your amazing photography, and it's demonstrating that you kind of have this sort of fun take on something that could be a little boring.
I think, too, that sketching is important to show, not just for process, but it demonstrates your problem-solving skills. And a hiring manager or an art director or a creative director is going to look for how you go about solving problems, because that's what good design does. It solves problems.
And if I could throw something in there, and sometimes it's breaking the wall down and understanding what they're looking for. As a designer, I love to see sketches because I find it charming, right? I love to see people's process. But when you go to interview, your one job in the position that you do is to make your boss look good. Breaking it down. I'm sorry if my panel does not agree to this. And that can be expressed in many different ways, and everybody has a boss, and sometimes the client is your boss. But what I want to see when I see sketches is how art-directed is somebody. Is this really their creation, or did you have an art director that was really heavy-handed and really told you what to do? And I need to know how much involvement do I need to have? Can I set you off and trust that you'll do it? Or are you going to be looking for more hands-on from your art director? Or is it one of those things where you really don't have a process, that you just sit at the computer, go through Pinterest, look what's cool, and copy that? Because nobody does that, right? No, and that's what sketches do, because we want to know that you are the person that people want to take images from Pinterest of. Instead of you following somebody else, they want to follow you. We want this designer that somebody else is following, and that's why we also like sketches.
And another note on sketches, I saw this process in a design office where the senior art director was the one doing all the sketching, and for this particular project that they were working on, it was for a new community development. And the way that they worked was that he'd sketch out a whole sheet of just ideas, and the account executive would take that to the client, and they would talk about it, and they might pick out 3 or 4, go back, and he would develop those out, and then go back and kind of narrow it down till they finally finished a completed sketch, and then it went over to a mechanical artist who drew up the final artwork. It was somebody else. But the point is to be able to work kind of quickly and not burn a lot of hours, to get a lot of ideas down so that you can really kind of get the client involved in the process. And clients nowadays aren't afraid to look at sketches. And I was talking about this at a session I did last night because back in the old days, before we had all of these tools, we used to work with layout paper and markers, and just that's all we did is draw layouts until we got approval, and then we could go to more refined artwork. But it's all about the ideas, and the rendering comes later. So I think we've talked about that one enough. Okay, good. Let me see if I can get back to. So the next one that I wanted to show, this is Eileen Passion, and she went through our MD-MFA program about, a year ago or so? Did she graduate? 2 years ago? Now, she got a lot of publicity from Full Sail. She lives out in California. She's a single mom. She really shone throughout our program to the point where we saw such great work. I was showing it to Platinum Creative, which is our in-house marketing department. They sent a crew out to Los Angeles, and they did a little documentary film on her, so she showed her work. And then we keep seeing her work pop up at BTS thing, behind the scenes presentations and things like that. But we've been kind of keeping track of her to kind of see what she's been doing. And so this is her current website, and you can see that it's very clean, and she has a wide array of things. And some of this is actually her schoolwork. Like here's a project that she did in school in our program. And you can see that she's written a little description, and then she shows, I think this goes to the next project. Sorry, my left hand doesn't work as well. Well, the idea here is that you can quickly navigate your way through some of her work if you're looking for something in particular. And I always tell people, let's see how this works. I always tell people that you have to be careful with this stuff because often people that are screening work are in a big hurry. They might have 150 applicants. So you have to present your work in a way that's going to be easy to navigate and easy for somebody to quickly go through it, because they're going to reject you in a second, if something is off. And a lot of times, and I guess we could talk a little bit about this a little bit more too, but clients have gotten to the point where if they don't see something in there that they can sort of imagine working for them, then you might not get the job. We've all had that experience.
And in fact, if it's okay, I'm going to just take a quick sidebar with this and talk about the technology of your portfolio, of your online portfolio, because at this state of the game, with web technologies and mobile and social, a poorly designed personal website is worse than using something pre-made, right? So using Behance is a nice standard. I've talked with a lot of art directors that are like, I'm actually perfectly happy with getting a Behance link for that. It's become a little bit of a standard. Now, if you're a web designer and you bill yourself as a UI designer and a web designer, then you wouldn't want to just have that Behance link. You're going to want your personal domain. And I encourage everybody really at some point should experiment with their own personal domain, get a web host, play with it, because it's your little slice of the internet and it's fun. But if it's not as nice and clean and easy to use as Behance or Square or even Wix, and we tend to make fun of Wix as designers, But you can do that. And in fact, Behance Adobe now has Portfolio, which is a nice way of cleaning up Behance to go from there. And it makes for instantly well curated, or as long as you curate them, well managed gallery spaces. Or even like if you want to do your own thing, WordPress is a great option with some themes. You can go from there. So it's like you're not being so like when I got into this industry, even though I wasn't a web designer, it was expected for me to make a CD-ROM. See, here's the little silver discs that music used to come on them too, and and we were expected to craft all this almost to the detriment of our work. Like we were being judged by the case rather than the content. So these days, it's kind of nice. It's going to be more about your story and how you apply it within your work rather than the casing that you're creating. So so it's, again, there's so many different options. So when you look and when you start, creating your own online presence, don't feel pressured to design something from the ground up. It's there's lots of options out there.
And a word of advice, too. When you're getting ready to go out to look for a job, look for freelance, don't stop yourself because you're trying to design your website. Get your work on something like Behance, get yourself out there, and then create phases. Phase 1, I'm completely on Behance, they can see my work, and then phase 2, I'll have my own website, is something you're always working towards, instead of the more, I can't go on, I don't have my website, it's not right, it's not done, and we're all chuckling because we've heard that, and maybe even done that before. And the thing to remember is it really is all about your work. The website, Behance, is nothing more than a portal for us to see it. And so we don't really care how it's designed. In fact, I'm actually more impressed by somebody who just very simply presents their work to me. There's a certain amount of confidence in that, as opposed to lots of different graphics and they're jumping everywhere, and it takes away from your work. And there's the effect of, as a new designer, you feel like you need to show more to impress. But I think it's also, after a while, you stop seeing your work almost. Like the more familiar you are, the less you see it. So more decoration starts to come into play. So if you find yourself going down that road, pull back, come back from the ledge, and just understand that really it is true that less is more, that we just want to see your work and what you can do. And there's no amount of splash, or I think Glee called it hairography, is ever going to help you get a job. Your work will.
And just to add on to that, the focus is your work. If I go to your website to look at your work, I don't want to have to wade through a bunch of decoration or flair or hairology to get to your work, because if that happens, I'm on to the next person. You just lost your space, right? When you go to an art gallery or a museum, how does the work look? The walls are white, usually, and the work is there, so the focus is on the work. You're not distracted by things around it. When I go to your website and you're looking for a job, I want to be able to see your work just like the student we showed. Right? Her work is right there in front of my face. There's no splash screen, there's no loading animation, there's no things jumping around. I can click on the pieces, look at it, make my decision, and move on, which makes my job easier. You do have a target audience when you're designing your portfolio. It's hiring managers, art directors, creative directors, right? That is your target audience, and you have to keep them in mind when you're designing your portfolio and your portfolio website, because they are the target audience. They are the ones that you have to please. They are your clients because they have the jobs that you want. So again, it's not what you want, right? Even though it's your work, you have to present it in a way that the viewer can easily navigate and understand quickly. Otherwise, if I have to try to figure out where your work is, how do I see it, where do I go, what do I click on, I'm just gonna go to the next one. You just made it easy for me to go to the next person. And you lose, right?
We had a student who, Peter is absolutely right about the museum approach with the white background and allowing the work to really kind of be in a more sterile environment. And we had a student that I think she was trying to create a personal brand out of it, so she used this purple background, and there were a lot of curly cues all around, and you didn't see what was really inside the windows because it was so distracting. And Peter is right. You send that out, and immediately they move on to the next.
I was just going to add one more thing is, and again, it's not specifically to an industry, but to the job you're going for. So I've known art directors that were hiring developers that they just want to see your GitHub repository, right? If you're of that world and you're using, like, they want to make sure, you know what GitHub is, and you know that's what a developer is using, and I want to see, and they'll want to see more of, what have you been? It's not even what are you developing, what are you playing with? So it's a completely different side. But from the design angle, and I would say motion graphics, and even in computer animation, and as a whale, it's still expected to have that sort of nicely oiled, front-facing portfolio experience, especially because of the competition, but also just because of the time it takes for that. So the worlds are a little bit different with that.
Yeah, and next, I'm going to show you Julia Royal's work, and here we have portfolios where she has things both on Behance, which Eric was just talking about, and then also a personal website, so we'll be able to see the differences between the two. Now, we've had our students work with Behance mainly because it's that clean presentation, but also because it happens to be somewhat of a social media site. People network through this. And I don't know, can you see this on the screen? You can see that over on the left, you can see that she's had 1,859 views of her work. She's had 151 appreciations. 80 people are following her, and she's following 37. Now, if she were constantly going into Behance and looking at other people's work and following them, then they'll see that she's following them and they may follow her, and so it sets up this network. And we've seen this happen all over the world. There are people from all over the world that are just kind of interested in looking at design and share ideas that way too. And as you go into these, let's see, I have to figure out which one I want to look at. See, there's a little bit of a thumbnail. Let's look at something that's kind of current, and since she's been out of school, she's starting to put her professional work in here, which is good, but she also has some student projects in here. Let's look at this one that she did in the MD-MFA program for a second. Okay, so she has a little bit of kind of a long explanation of what the project is about. And as it walks through, it's showing her process, because here she's developed some personas for her target audience. She's showing her logo exploration. And here's a motion graphic. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. Color palette, just talking about the mood board that she used to kind of establish the look and feel of the brand. Now, if I were a creative director looking to hire her, I could scroll through this kind of quickly and look at some of her other work and kind of see that she knows what she's doing, right?
In fact, I'll just add that, since long scrolling kind of has become sort of the standard for galleries, right? You click through and you kind of have a long scroll that you're dealing with. So you have a lot of opportunity to tell the story, but the big thing with that is you have to have a hero image at the top, because if you don't have something interesting at the top, nobody's going to get to the bottom. So you can't bury the lead, right? You can't bury,
exactly.
That's a writing term, right? And you can't bury the best work down at the bottom. You have to be upfront about it, because what's amazing about this example is the level of work and the amount of work, and that's going to come across. But if it's not enticing at the top, nobody's going to make it down to these watches. And so and I think she does that. She has some very engaging imagery and kind of paints this picture in her writing and with her work at the top of the page.
And if she gets the opportunity to go in and talk about this work in person, she'll say that she did this whole project in a period of 2 courses. You know, like, it's amazing. 8 weeks. And it goes on and on. But what's interesting is that she's found ways to bring motion into things, and it makes it a little bit more interesting than just, static display.
In fact, the GIF is back with a vengeance. Like a well-crafted GIF on a portfolio page, not just to show off that you can make an animated GIF, which is, believe it or not, is still a skill. 35 years later, is still a skill that people need to know. But these short little animated GIFs are great for demonstrating process as well as posting on your social media as an example of what you're doing, and they're fun. I mean, like it's a lighthearted way, and the fact that it's a GIF is I'm still kind of astounded that it's a GIF for some of us, if you want to say it wrong. I'm in the GIF camp. But so I just want to throw that out there. It's like there's all these little ways, and in fact, if just for a second, if I could say, this is a good opportunity to talk about your portfolio versus your social media identity, right? Your social media identity as a designer or as a professional is part of your portfolio, but you shouldn't feel the need to make your social media your portfolio. Right, so it'll have elements of your portfolio. It'll have elements, but it's more of an experimental thing. Art directors that I've been talking to recently, I've asked them how much digging in are they doing to their prospective hires, and it's funny. We've kind of transitioned away. Most people know not to post the really crazy stuff now. We have generations of people that have grown up with social media, so you're no longer surprised by like, oh, that's really inappropriate. Like I think we've gotten to that point. I at least I don't see it as much. Maybe that's because I'm boring. But depends who you follow, I guess, online. But when it comes to your designer personality or your professional portfolio or professional social media identity, is they want to see that you live this stuff. So like, are you out and do you sketch when you're out with your friends and take a picture of that sketch on the napkin and post that? Or are you just having fun and you're doing these experimental typography things that aren't in your portfolio because they're experimental and maybe they're not even very good, but you wanted to share with the world? Oh, look, I'm playing with this new idea. They're really looking for those types of people now. And as a designer, sometimes we don't want to share our early stuff. We don't want to share that, it's like we want to be polished, but Instagram is really good for that. Instagram is a place where it's forgiving, where you can go to and follow these amazing designers and scroll all the way down and see some really bad student work in their feed, and they kind of relish it. Like, look at how far I've grown. Scroll all the way down and see, really bad kerning, and so social media is a vital part of that.
But I think it's important to acknowledge there's a difference between your personal social media presence and your professional one. And one of the trends I'm seeing as an instructor is that those lines are starting to get blurred. In your professional social media, you don't want a glamour shot of yourself. You are not a project to post. And I'm seeing more and more of that. And I think it's important to understand how that's going to be received. Again, it comes back to, we just want to see your work. You don't want the job opportunity to come down to how you appear. You want to be judged on the work you do. So let it focus on that.
I wanted to show you one more page on her Behance site because it was interesting to us, and she was the first student to do that. Normally when you go into Behance, you upload your photos and your JPEGs usually, and you can put some text in there, and you can use the default and kind of get away with it. And it's okay, the work is there, it's clean, it's against a white background. But what Eileen did, and like I said, she was the first one, I think, in our program to do this, is that she actually designed graphics that could drop in there and become more of a cohesive experience. where as you scroll down this long thing, you can see her process of developing this project. She put a lot of work into this, but it is just awesome. And for us, we've probably graduated 1,000 students out of that program, and this is like one of the ones that we always remember. We always go back and use this as an example. I also mentioned too to our students that when you put work into Behance, let's say that it's maybe a one-page ad in a magazine, and it's taller than it is wide, and the students will drop that in and it'll go to the width, and you don't see the whole thing in one shot. So we have to be careful how we design for this in the presentation. But look at the built-in animation again, to demonstrate how things work. And Behance also has the ability to put in video, right? This has audio with it too. I'm not plugged into that, but you can play these videos.
And just something to keep in mind, guys, when you are creating your portfolio, creating your Behance or your digital online presence, you still have, like I said before, your target audience, and you have to keep them interested. Yeah. So we have different formats, different layouts, different things going on, so the viewer is constantly interested, right? So if you go to the page and there's just boring squares and rectangles, I might not scroll down to the bottom of the page like Erica was saying earlier. So this example is great because it has all different types of media that we can see on there. It's laid out properly, to keep us visually interested. It kind of leads one into the other. And then we have animated pieces and different types of work, again, to keep me, I want to see more. I want to scroll down. That's the idea you want to build into your presentation, that the viewer wants to see more. They want to see what else is going on. Where else is this going to go? What else have you done? So, you don't want to make a boring presentation. It's just like any other project, right? You got to keep it interested. You got to keep your viewer, who is a potential employer, interested. If you bore me, again, I'm going to go to the next thing because I got to look at 5, 10, 15 of these in one day. So don't make it easy for the viewer to go to the next one.
Now this is Julia's other website, which of course is in a different format, and it's a little bit more like the Shermaev Geismar site, right? You see some windows and go through it. And I remember I was showing an earlier portfolio website of hers to our program advisory committee. We meet with them a couple of times a year and show the student work. And at that time, Julia had this header that said, "Hi, I'm Julia Royal, I'm a web designer." And when I showed the work, someone in the program advisory committee said, "Boy, did she ever limit herself, because she can do so much more than websites." So it kind of made me remember that, when you go out there and you show your work, your potential employer or client is going to look at that, and they're going to match that up with what they think that they need. And if you limit yourself in certain ways, you may not have an opportunity. It's a really strange thing, because a good designer can really take any project, if they're a good problem solver, and figure out how to do it and to match whatever brand or develop their brand. But clients have gotten to the point now where they've seen so much work, coming out from designers, that they'll pick and choose ones that they feel are going to be a little bit easier to work with, because maybe their style matches what they think they want, right?
In fact, I'll add a little bit about that is, as a fresh student out of design or an art school, there are, there's a level of job. Okay, there's the junior designer, junior art, junior artist or junior developer, whatever, which usually what you're selling, you're branding yourself for that level of position is, hard work. I love what I do. I have talent. Look where I can go, right? But then there's a difference between going for that job where it's kind of about yourself in a way and your talent. And then there's the higher level position. Okay, maybe you're a couple years out, or maybe you have some experience and you're going straight for a more senior type position. Those positions are connected to money. All right. When somebody's hiring for a senior position, they need that person to be able to make money for the company. Okay. So there's not a ramp up time for like, oh, this person is really good at this. We do this over here, and that person will be able to get to there in about 6 months. So when you're at that level, you need to, that's when you really tailor your portfolio to the person or to the company that you're dealing with, and you make sure there's work in your portfolio that they can use immediately. It's the exact type, because then they go, that person could be making us money, right? It sounds a little overly capitalist, right? But it's really the honest truth. On the junior level, there's that little sort of ramp up time, but as soon as you get a little bit higher, and I've heard a discussion with a hiring manager recently who was like, I really want you for this type of position, but I can't get you any higher than that because there's not enough I see there that I can use right out of the gate. And then I would even say is for freelance, it's like that higher position, because if you're coming in as a freelancer for a short amount of time, you have to make an impact faster. So you have to have that type of project that they know they can use, especially with, an illustration. Is it your style of illustration? If it's animation, do you have that, do you have the technical skill set, or are you going to have to be ramping up for a couple weeks before you go on? So the level of job will really determine the types of work that goes into your portfolio as well.
And a lot of hiring managers, and I did this as well, is when I was looking at portfolios, I was actually looking at portfolios for the position higher than what I was actually interviewing for. And it's important to note that the job you're interviewing for, of course you can do it, but show where you can go. Show what you can hint at, where you can possibly go. Because within the industry, we want to hire and promote from within. So we want to know that when we hire you, you're not going to dwell in the one position. You're going to move up and make a difference in our company. And so it is important to show that you have that capability as well.
Good, okay. I want to show you one other thing here on this site. She's started this blog, which is kind of interesting, right in her website, called Weekly Roundup. And this is going to be hard for you to read, so I'll read it. July 1st to the July 14th Roundup. The last couple of weeks have been crazy town in the design world. I've been involved in a lot of fun projects, from photo restoration to gift certificates to icons to logos, and revectorizing a vintage t-shirt design for a pizzeria in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. I'll just drop a few mock-up photos for this post, since the goal is not to write a novel about each and every project, which I could most definitely do. Enjoy. So it's kind of like an update, and this is the one from the previous. The thing is, once you start this kind of thing, then you have to keep going, right? So you have to set aside some time. But I know her, and I know that she's very passionate about her work, and she will probably keep this going. It's a lot of pressure to put on her, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here. Okay. Click it over, please. Can you get the back? Yeah.
Let me show one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Here, I'll take this. I'm going to show one more portfolio. Let's see what we got. Just to throw an illustrator in there, because they're always a little different. And back in the early days of my career, we were hiring a lot of illustrators. None of us as designers could really draw, or maybe we could draw, but we only had one style, and we had to have a style that was really appropriate for our project. And so what we would do is we'd call up an illustrator rep. And in Chicago, there were a ton of them because we had so many advertising agencies. And so you talk on the phone with the rep a little bit about the project you were working on, what you were thinking, and he'd come over with 3 or 4 portfolios in those cases, and he'd show you examples of his stable, he called it, of his illustrators. And if you found one in there, then you could get a project going, and then you go through all the sketching back and forth with that. But now, illustrators post their work on their websites, and so it gives us a chance to see what their style is like. And immediately looking at this, you can see the diversity of styles. And this kind of is important, I think, for designers, young designers, if you have a particular style and you're very narrow, then you're probably going to only be attracted to certain clients. And if you can show a little bit of broader range of work, you'll have maybe more of a chance to pick up other jobs. So the question is, I'll put this back on the committee, is like, how many examples would you want to have in your portfolio, and how diverse should the work be? I don't know if that's a good question or not, but I think it comes up.
Yeah, it's a great question. I work under the idea of, a little broader range, like you said, so you don't get pigeonholed, and it opens up opportunities. In my opinion, I think a designer should be versatile in the styles they should be able to work in. They might have styles they like to work in that are their favorite, and that's fine, and show those, but I'd like to see a range. Because if you're working at a particular agency or a company, they might have a range of different clients wanting different styles, and if I'm hiring you, I want to get more out of my money that I'm spending on you as an employee. As far as like number, it's always a tricky question, right? Because you think, especially as students, you're like, I have to put as much as I can in there, right? Because it's going to show I don't have enough work. But at the same time, I'm not going to go look through 85 projects. Again, I don't have the time, right? So, I mean, depending on your experience level, especially coming out of school, 5, 6, 7 projects, somewhere in there, probably under 10. And obviously, the more experience you get, the more projects you're going to have. And again, you want to have those projects show the different skills and abilities that you have, because you're selling yourself through your work. So if I'm hiring you, I want to be able to look at it and go, oh, this person can do clean and corporate. They can do, grungy and dirty. They can do kid-friendly. And that, if that's what my company does, you're more valuable to me.
Look how diverse this person's work is. It's amazing.
And it's important to note that the portfolio is not a numbers game. It really is about the quality of work. But I'll break it down by numbers. And because you're going to be able to find many different websites who are going to advise you need 10 pieces or, whatever number. But I would say that if you have 5 projects that are brilliant, but you want to get to that 10, so you have 5 brilliant and 5 average, maybe even above average. If you show all 10, it looks like you're only brilliant half the time, right? But if you only show the 5, you're brilliant all the time. And a word about the diversity. It's important to show diversity not just in style, but also in type, in target audience, method of execution, color scheme, fonts. I know we all love Helvetica. We have to break the chain at some point. And even, age range, color, all of I said the color scheme, because people do tend to design in the colors of the clothes they wear. Don't believe me? Look at your closet and you'll see. But what I will say is the best advice I can give is that you almost need to reverse engineer your portfolio. And let's just say you're going for a job, and I come from the publishing world, so let's just say that you're going for a publishing job. And you have to think about, they're going to want to see in my portfolio that I'm the person for the job. We are the only industry that shows examples of our work before we even get hired. If I go to have my brakes changed, I don't ask for pictures of the last 3 jobs you did. I just trust you know how to do it. That trust is not there for us. So by your project selection, you can show what I can do. So if I'm going for publishing, I might want a magazine article. I might want book covers, magazine covers, and I'm just off the top of my head. So a real selection, because those are the types of things that you're going to do in publishing. So then that can help you to say, what does the interviewer need to see to hire me? And those are the projects that you put in there and help to show diversity. It's also important to recognize your portfolio is a sales document 100% of the time. It is not a scrapbook. It is not a photo album. You are selling somebody that you are the person for the job, as I mentioned earlier, to put any fears they have at rest that you may not make them look good. And so in that way, you can say, well, I want to show I have this skill. This is a great project to show I have great color correction, say. And I'll show it within my magazine cover project. And so that, number one, gives you discussion points. And number two, you don't have the question of, in their mind of, well, can they do this? Can they do that? No, you have answered every question they have before they open their mouth because your project shows you can do it.
So it takes some research to understand the client, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm going to capstone that with, when we are talking numbers, one graphic doesn't make a portfolio project. A portfolio project, as you're seeing in all these examples, have multiple images and multiple applications and usually have multiple parts. So think of them as more campaigns as you're going through. So one image, and your personal brand doesn't count. So your personal brand is the brand that is around your portfolio, but don't have a portfolio piece of like, this is my logo. And we're like, oh, okay, so you can brand yourself. That's kind of a given. That's your portfolio is part of your portfolio, but everything else is going to be more client driven or external.
I did read an article recently, I think on the AIGA website, about how many pieces should go in the portfolio, and they said 4 to 6 is fine. One thing that you don't want to do is create this archive of stuff, and I have a tendency to do that because I've got a lot of projects. So you load them up, and then it becomes like overwhelming. So the other thing about Behance is that you can publish and unpublish those. So what I do now is I keep all my stuff unpublished, and then if I had the time, if I'm out looking for a freelance job and somebody asks me to send the work, I can only publish the ones that are going to be really focused on that particular market.
And I'm going to steal a story from the immortal bard Willie Freeman, all right, who used to teach here. And he would tell the students about be careful of the ugly baby, all right? And which the ugly baby is, you spend, when you have children, you spend a lot of time and effort with, bringing that baby into the world. And to you, that baby is amazing. That baby is brilliant. That baby is beautiful. It's a golden being of light. Oh my gosh, that baby. To everybody else on that panel, that baby is an ugly baby. All right, there's no such thing as a good-looking baby. They're all ugly when they're born, right? And for your portfolio, it's very easy to get an ugly baby into your portfolio because you had such an amazing time producing that work. Oh my gosh, that video shoot was amazing. I loved working with that. But then the end result is an ugly baby. You need somebody with you to kind of say, like, hey, you got to get that ugly baby out of there. Get rid of it, or take the time to turn that ugly baby into, throw him off the cliff. Sorry. That went the wrong direction. We'll edit that in post. But so it's important to realize that it's like, and actually in some ways that's what's nice about your social media, is your social media can show your love of like, oh my gosh, I loved working on this. This was such an amazing experience. Share that through your social media, but maybe that project doesn't end up in your portfolio because the end result wasn't something that you wanted to be able to share. And then you can use your social media to compensate for, add that story and go from there. So beware of ugly babies.
Okay. Just to bookend the ugly baby, and I won't say throw him off a cliff or drown him, but we have to be careful of the things we like, because we like bad things, right? And we get attached to these things that we produce, right? Personally attached, and you want to show the world, like we were just saying, but a lot of times, that gets foggy because our love of it, our like of it, our enjoyment of it kind of, doesn't let us see the truth about it. So you got to be really careful because, I like junk food. It's bad for me, but I like it, right? So just because you like a project doesn't mean it's successful or portfolio worthy.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the boring stuff. make that go. There we go. So your personal brand is not just about your portfolio. Sometimes what happens is your writing is going to be the first thing a hiring manager sees. So writing matters because it's the first thing they're going to see. So you have to pay really close attention to all of your writing. So I think Julia doing that blog was really cool because it's part of her ongoing writing habit. So she's working on her writing as well as working on her design. But then I teach the writing course. Of course, I'm going to say that. So with cover letters, what you want to think about is how you're going to grab a hiring manager's attention. And it could be something that's, sent electronically or through an email. So the resume cover letter part of this can be, think about all the different ways that you may be putting your writing out there. So with cover letters, you want to think about hooking your reader. I mean, you want to keep them interested. You don't want this big old biography going on for paragraphs and paragraphs because none of us want to read that much. Even though I have 3 English degrees, I don't want to read that much. So some tricks you can use to hook your reader are maybe like start with a quote. The quote should be something that resonates with you, that represents you, but also kind of ties into the industry. Something else you can think about is storytelling. Everybody relates to stories. We've all got our own stories, so tell a story that, again, relates back to the job that you're applying for. When you're writing specifically, remember, resumes and cover letters are not one size fits all. If you try sending the same resume and cover letter and blanketing the universe with it, you're probably not going to get any responses. Because what hiring managers are looking for is that you've done the research, that you know their company inside and out because you want to be a part of it. So what you want to think about is doing that research on the company. I made a mistake once interviewing for a job, and I didn't dig deep enough in their website, and I got called out on it in the interview with a table full of people, and I never forgot it again. I now know everybody's website that I go in and interview with. Show your passion. If it's an industry that you really believe in, show your passion for it. And sometimes you can write unconventionally, so you can think outside the box and not just be dear sir, madam. If you have a really interesting story that ties into something that maybe relates to one of the projects that they're showing on their company website, hook the reader like that. Okay, I can't get it to move. Oh, maybe your arm's in the way. So with the resume, as designers, we want really nice resumes. We want them to look fabulous. But here's the problem. When you're applying for jobs electronically, a live person might not be seeing your resume right away, so your resume is going to be scanned. So you want that clear and concise formatting. And we talked earlier about, you can have 2 resumes. You can have the really nice graphic, designy resume, but then you need one that's going to have really specific information on it with clear and concise formatting. So you want to make sure that the information is organized, that you're having clearly defined sections, that you're using quantified results. And this ties into what Eric was saying about you have to make the company money. So if you're talking about a project that you did and it increased sales, that's just not enough. I did a project for the Nature Conservancy. I do a lot of pro bono work. I give my work away to nonprofit organizations. It's what I do. So the Nature Conservancy wanted to buy environmentally sensitive land in Brevard County, and my friend asked me if I would design these brochures that would go out to registered voters. So if I had it just on my resume that I designed direct mail pieces for the Nature Conservancy, that's not going to get anybody's attention. The result of that campaign was it was so successful in Brevard County, they asked me to do it in 3 more counties in Florida, and we ended up raising $500 million to buy environmentally sensitive land in Florida that has never been built on to this day. So everybody wins. So showing and demonstrating those quantified results are really important. Again, with your resume, be efficient. I teach the copywriting class in media design along with professional practice. Efficiency and being concise, don't bore your readers. Well-crafted descriptors, if you have a special project on your resume, make sure they can understand it right out of the gate. And demonstrate your reliability. You don't want to, talk about how you were a server at the Cheesecake Factory and you made all your shifts, but demonstrate that you're not that flaky employee, that you are hardworking, and that you do meet deadlines. In design, deadlines are everything, so you have to be able to demonstrate that. With personal branding, you have to differentiate yourself, and it's really important to stand out from the crowd. When you're stuck with 150 other applicants, what's going to make you stand out? So sometimes it's your personal branding. So you want to not go crazy and have, this over-designed stuff and your brand is all this. This is just a definition of personal branding. What I want to talk about really, though, is your personal branding statement. It's almost like a tagline that sells you. I teach copywriting, so of course I'm going to talk about the being concise. I want you to come up with one statement that really resonates who you are and how that makes you different. So for example, a single sentence that covers your areas of skill and mastery. You want to be authentic, you don't want to be lying. I hate when companies create a tagline that offers all these promises and it really doesn't. So you want to be authentic. For example, I am the art director who writes. That sets me apart. Not every art director out there has 3 English degrees, can write a screenplay, can write copy. So think about, and the best way to do this is to come up with a list and think about all your special talents. And then think about what makes you different than all the other applicants out there and highlight that and separate yourself from the crowd. So talk about what your passion is. How do you make things happen? What skills do you bring that make that happen? And what makes you different from everyone else? Again, you're not going to come up with that tagline, first thought, best thought. I always say that only worked for poet Allen Ginsberg. The rest of us have to revise, rewrite, throw things away, and start over. So work on this by writing a lot, talking about all of your skills, get it all out on paper, and then edit yourself. Be concise, read it aloud, hear how your words sound. So the biggest takeaway from my standpoint is that writing really matters, and remember, it might be the first thing that someone sees. It might be an email you're sending to a company to get an interview, and that's what's going to represent you. So take it just as seriously as your design portfolio. I'm done speechifying.
And if I could throw something in there about writing from a couple of points of view. And can you guess the number one thing that if you do in your writing, will get your resume, your portfolio, your website out the door? Spelling. You can survey any number of people, every single hiring manager, you have a spelling mistake, especially a very obvious one. I had somebody send me a portfolio and they did a cover and it was Chaos was the title in big 72-point type and they spelled it CHOAS. Something so big you would think they see, but that's the effect that we stop seeing things after a while. Everybody's received that email where the letters are transposed, but we still could read it. So get friends to help read after you, and whatever you do, whether it's your resume, your personal statement, or even the work that you're showing, don't let a little mistake derail your career and where you're going.
In the media design degree program, they do a thesis website as part of their thesis presentation. And I'm the one that comes at them about grammar, proofreading, generalizations. Be specific. So when you're talking about your project, nail those specifics. Because not everybody was in there in the room with you when you were designing the project, so always be specific and read aloud and double check your spelling, have someone else read it. That's really important, because I saw typos in these thesis websites and I'm like, these are live and they're out there, or maybe on their mastery journal assignment that, it's on Tumblr so people can find it. So if you want to leave that type of impression, then don't proofread your work. But if you want to get hired and you want to advance your career, every word counts.
and it's often it's looked on as kind of being a little complacent, is if you have those type of mistakes, and we've all done it. We've all had, well, I'm not going to assume. Yeah, I mean, I misspelled R. Kelly's name on MTV. So, yeah, that was, and I had to do a quick animation to fix, like, oh, great work, you misspelled his name. The one word in this project, right? So we've all been there. So often it's then how do you recover from that? You don't go, like, it's just an and, right? You don't respond to that. You're like, oh my gosh, and you fix these things right away. So if you get caught in a misspelling on your website and somebody points it out to you, you thank them. As soon as you step out of that office, you fix it and you send it back to them and go, done, right? Fixed, right? And then suddenly, hey, this guy owned up to a mistake, he fixed it, and he immediately sent it to me with it. And so how you respond to that. I responded with a series of curse words and probably didn't handle it as well as I should have. So so how you respond to that. And it's funny because like with our texting society, misspelling is part of our life these days. And so that's why you almost have to have that second personality when you're emailing professionally and texting, and even, Twitter and Facebook. If you could be the social media person with grammar, that would set you aside from 90% of what we see online. So it doesn't take much, but you can capitalize on it.
I want to add something too. You think as a designer that you never have to write, right? And we've shown on these portfolios that just, writing a few sentences will help to support your work. But writing is more and more important, and especially as you move up the levels through into managerial positions. And, my first job as a creative director, I found myself having to write a lot. I was managing a staff, so back in those days, again, before we had this, I had a secretary, and she sat outside my office, and she had a typewriter, and so I'd hand her my handwritten notes because I didn't know how to type myself, and I could hear her snicker because of my grammar and my spelling, and so I learned to correct that and pay much more attention to it. And now, now I'm responsible for writing a lot of curriculum and also reports and things like that. And I'll even write assignments sometimes, with the course directors. And so, you realize that that's a very, very important skill, and especially as you move up the ladder into more executive positions. So keep that in mind. But yeah, Teresa's right. It is a filter that, you won't get that job if they see that. Yeah.
Exactly. And and here I'll share some design hacks too. I'll call them life hacks. I understand as designers, we're not always great writers. A lot of people love the written word and are very impressed, but others are not. So there's trade, and there's a lot. This is something that happens a lot in the design industry. So hook up with a really great writer, agree to do their logo if they edit your work, right? And so you can do things like that. But that said, I know people who have had a pool installed because they traded design work. I got my house painted years ago. But that's the important thing, is to understand that. Also, designers are not very good about talking about themselves, right? How many people look forward to drafting their own branding statement and then actually talk about how great they are? Sometimes it's called the personal branding statement. If you go into the business world, it's sometimes called an elevator pitch, the idea that couple sentences you can say about yourself in an elevator ride. Have your mom or a person who loves you write it, and then who really will talk about your talents, because we tend to be pretty hard on ourselves and the worst critic of ourselves. So if you find yourself in that position where you're not comfortable talking about yourself, then reach out to somebody who can and give unbiased opinions and get help that way.
And just a little more on the copywriting and texting and making sure you are sounding professional. Text talk is not professional talk. Lowercase i's, when you say I, does not count. Again, like Teresa said, like Elena said, that's the first thing I'm going to look at. And if you put on your resume or your cover letter that you pay close attention to detail, guess what I'm going to do when I look at your resume or your cover letter? I'm going to look at it even harder, because you just said you pay close attention to detail. And I've seen that before with 4, 5, 6 misspellings in their resume after they say they pay close attention to detail. So if you're going to say it, you better make sure it's perfect.
We didn't show you many or any examples of the way that resumes could be laid out, but I wanted to kind of reiterate what Elena said about having to have a version that can be Xeroxed or scanned, because when you go into a corporation, they're going to do that and they're going to put it in files or distribute it, so you have to be careful about that. I had one where there were little graphics and pie charts and things, and when I Xeroxed it, it just all went away, so it was useless. But anyway, I think we need to stop and start questions now, but I just wanted to summarize by, letting you know that we appreciate you attending and hope that this is beneficial. So anybody here have questions, or anyone online? We have an online question.
Someone wanted to know, they are in the entertainment business masters. They wanted to know how they would make a portfolio more for investment seeking as opposed to seeking jobs.
Yeah.
The question is if you are creating a portfolio that you're more interested in getting investors as opposed to clients. Is that correct? They're basically formed the same way, but the difference is that whereas you're really profiling the hiring manager and what they're looking for in a worker, you have to now look at it, what are they looking for in it as an investor? So what's going to take, what do I need to see that I'm going to open up my wallet and hand you $50,000 and trust you with that? This money that I worked so hard for, what's it going to take for me to show that? So a lot of the speak needs to turn to is, how is this going to make money, or your return of investment? How is this going to help me? How well have you done your research? Instead of saying there's no competition out there, for instance, then that is actually going to scare an investor, because that means you're not a disruptor, that maybe it hasn't existed because it shouldn't. So all of those kind of details that I'm kind of throwing out there is the idea of making sure that you're answering any question before they have a chance to ask it. I would also look at the lean startup model. There's a really great way that they put together presentations to help go towards investors. And to that end, in most cities, I know in Orlando where we're at, we have it, but they have what's called a startup weekend, and they can run you through the paces on how you're to create presentations for investors and actually pitch at the very end of the weekend as well. So I would do that a few times.
And something to add to that too is that often when a presentation is made, there's a leave behind piece that needs to be designed. And also, going back to the resume again and the cover letter, if you're a designer, you really need to think about design with that. Don't just, do any old thing. As you become more experienced in the design field, you realize that everything you put down has to be designed.
And I always like to say you have to anticipate the no's. Yeah. Your presentation going, what is going to be the one thing that, or the few things that will make them say no to me? Maybe I don't have enough experience, so I'm going to show that I do. Or maybe this is an untapped market. I'm going to show how this is possible that they can be reached. It's those things too.
Do we have other questions? Right there, okay. Have to get him a microphone. Welcome back, by the way.
You remembered.
He was here last night.
What's it called? This kind of, I think, piggybacks off of that last question, but I'm more interested in running my own personal freelance kind of company and potentially turning that into a studio. And at this point, when I graduate, should I focus more on a personal brand as my personal self as Izzy Martinez, or should I focus on my company that I'm looking to really start up?
You're gonna, as many people, you're gonna ask as many different opinions as you're gonna get, to be honest. But I would say, whatever you choose, don't represent yourself to be something that you're not. Like if you create a brand for a company, but it's really just you, and maybe you even have some kind of answering machine that pretends like you have a receptionist and stuff like this, that's the easiest way to get out of the running, because you're not being honest, so to say. It's not an intentional lie. You're just trying to be part of, to have a seat at the table, right? That's all you're really wanting. So that's where we go. A lot of people, though, as far as owning your own business, and why I say that you're going to get a varied opinion, a lot of people are going to suggest having at least an internship at a business to see how it's run before you leap, and that way you can even build up a client base as well. It's a lot less stress if you know there's a salary coming in while you're building something.
Let me just also add that it also kind of really depends on what type of clients you're going for. So if you're working for agencies and other designers, they hire people. They don't hire other companies, really. They want to hire Izzy, right? And so even when you're dealing with other businesses, if they want to know you, you need to have a portfolio for yourself. Then there are times where you might start going for clients that are looking for, I want to hire an agency, or I want to hire a boutique shop, and you're a small boutique shop, and maybe it's you and two other people. That can be a fully functional agency in a way. Then you can start branding your company as a thing. But often I recommend you have to have yourself situated before you can go into that direction. So if you're going to choose one, focus on yourself, but there's nothing stopping you from saying, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I run this. I've actually, and make sure it's real, make sure it's an LLC, and go through those steps. Don't have it be like, oh, let's go to your conference room, and it's your mom's basement. Like it's not a good plan. And with the co-working spaces that they have now, and you can rent conference rooms and things like that, it is becoming more common to have companies of 1 and 2 people. So it can be a real thing. It's just exactly being honest about it and understanding that, okay, well, it might be a little while before that you're taken seriously as a company, so you can be taken seriously as a person right away.
One thing that comes out in these portfolios that we've been looking at are the values of the designer, and think about that too. What are your values, and how do you want to represent yourself? This was several years ago, but Eric and I were at a conference up in Chicago, and we got to sit through a couple of presentations. One was by Martha Stewart's creative director, and she went on to talk about how they chose their color palette from bird's eggs. Remember that? Those blues and those browns, and that became their color palette, and how they designed their magazine. And then we go to the next one, and here's a guy from New York who called himself a bad boy designer, and everything that he did was black. Sorry. But, that's ringing. Sorry about that.
The Johnny Cash of design.
Yeah. No, I don't usually. But he created this this brand book for himself, and he got somebody else to design it, and it was just just what you'd imagine. And he promoted it. I don't remember his name now, but he promoted it by making a video where he had the book laying on a table, and he went out to a farm, and he got a bunch of baby chickens, and he had them walking around on the thing, and his tagline was chicks love, whatever his name was. And it was just the weirdest thing, to go from Martha Stewart to that, But both of them were on brand for themselves, but by then, they were far long enough in their careers where they had established this brand, and so people go to them because that's what they want,
And I'm just going to point out is when it comes to the sort of the freelance discussion, we've actually had a similar panel recently on Full Sail on Air revolving that. So, and with, I think had a really good discussion. So I can give you that link as well, so you can see what we really think about freelance, because we've all been there too.
Any other questions? Okay, we need a microphone. Hold on a second.
Let me bring it up. And this will be the last one, because we got to wrap up for the next one. Actually, while you're there, we all have our phones vibrating and going off for that. But also, it never hurts to have your portfolio in your photos on your phone in an album. So in a moment's notice in a party, you can just go, yeah, this is what I do.
I'm kind of interested in doing freelance work, and I was wondering, since our portfolios are mostly online and we communicate online, how do we know if the offer that we're getting is genuine? And like, how do we figure out our price tag and like if we should take the offer?
So you're talking about doing a transaction just online without meeting the person?
I guess so, yeah.
This
how
is
do you
something
figure
I've
out
talked
your
about a
price
lot
tag?
recently.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to throw out here, since this is opening a big can of worms, so we can talk more, is I don't want you to be jaded in any way, right? However, when you are a really fresh graduate, every job that comes in, you do have to ask yourself, why did they come to you? Meaning because somebody who has maybe has zero experience, why is this big opportunity coming your way? And all you have to do is ask yourself that, and maybe then start asking them questions, and that can steer you away from things because you're like, oh, so, and ask them that. So why are you coming to you? Because it could be like, you know what, I saw it, and I really liked your work, and I think it would work out great. Okay, well then it could work it out. But, we've had instances, especially with online, is where suddenly it's, you're working for free for a little while, or we've had equipment stolen because somebody showed up on set, and then, and they lost their laptop as a result of this, and because it was not on the up and up. So, you have to ask yourself that, which is sometimes why we recommend working full-time for an agency for a little while or for a shop, just because that you learn so much from, because even they are having these issues. A multinational company can have these types of issues with clients. So you just have to ask yourself that and start there, but it's also definitely a bigger discussion.
I think as a designer, one of the first things I would establish is, where is your line in the sand? What will you do and what won't you do? As far as subject matter goes, are you willing to create packaging to sell socks? Or even certain political matters or other things like that. Define that for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. Knowing and putting it out there. That's who you'd like to work with. As far as on the up and up, most designers approach things very happily and carefree, and we want to believe people are good and they're really going to do right by us. But and they're chuckling because every single one of us did that, and every single one of us have a story where we've been burned. So the best advice, and I know how hard it is about to say, talk about money as quickly as possible, because you will know then if they're going to put up and really pay you. If they start to kind of hem and haw and like, oh, I don't know, they're never going to pay you. And let me tell you, some of the worst clients you'll ever have are friends and family.
Yeah, and there has to be a mutual trust. So if you work out an agreement as to how much you're going to get paid for it, then you can ask for some of that up front. And if you don't get that, then you know right away you're in trouble. I've had a lot of situations too with startups. They come because they need some materials to get their company going, and they want you to do it for free, and saying, well, if things pan out, then we'll give you a share of the company or something like that. And it's like, those things never work out, and you end up spending a lot of time that you could be spending on legitimate projects. So you got to be really careful. It's like Craigslist. You got to be careful. Yeah.
Even though there is the story, I I can't remember if it's Facebook or Google, and they needed something painted. So they did that. They offered a percentage of the company to paint, and I guess this guy's a millionaire now because
Yeah, and
he
it's the
went-
same. Yeah, the
so
same.
there's the
Yeah.
lightning bolt moments, but
Yeah, I met the original art director for Playboy magazine, and in the beginning, Hugh Hefner went to him and said, "Look, I'm starting this magazine. I need a good art director. I'll pay you in stock." Okay, so that guy's a multi-millionaire now. Yeah.
Just don't get, for those type of opportunities, you have to know, can you afford that? Can you afford not to get paid? And then it's not worth the risk if it's like, oh, I'm going to lose my house if this thing goes under. Those risks, you have to mitigate. You might have to work twice as hard because you're doing something else as a backup project while you're working on this one. So,
And as Elena mentioned too, it's nice to do work for non-for-profits, and sometimes doing those for free, if you have the time, really pay off because they appreciate the work and they want it, and you can get some nice samples out of that, and you're giving back to the community, which is fantastic. I still do those to this day. Yeah.
Like Don was saying and Elena was saying, if those projects, the pro bono, find ones you're passionate about. Those are the ones that you feel are worth doing for free because it's, SPCA or Save Something, and, something you really feel passionate about. And don't ever do work just for your portfolio. Right. A lot of people, especially with fresh designers coming out of school, like, oh, it'll be great for your portfolio. Well, that doesn't buy me food or pay the rent or put gas in my car. If you switch that around to someone else, like Teresa was saying, yeah, fix my brakes, it'll be great for your portfolio. Like, what? No mechanic's going to fix your brakes for free because it'll be good exposure, right? That doesn't pay the bills. And again, at the same time, unless it's like some fantastic lightning strike opportunity, right? Just be smart, ask questions, ask as many questions as you need so you feel comfortable.
But be open to trade as well. Peter tells a story that a client didn't have a lot of money, so he did it for the budget plus a computer that was in the corner. So you can approach it that way too.
But also, if you do the trade, make sure the trade equals the amount of time you would spend. So if you're doing a website for a car wash and they give you one free car wash, that's not going to cut it. I want 2 car washes a month for a year, right? So do the math.
Also, Elena mentioned talking to career development because they have all these contacts and there are people out there that would like students to work with them, and you'll get paid for some of those projects. So it's a little bit safer that way.
Well, thank you, Don.
Thank
I think
you.
that wraps us up. Anything else online? I think we're good.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending and for your attention this whole time, and I hope that this will be of some value for now and in the future. And good luck with your careers. We'll keep an eye on you. Thank you.
So if you like, I take all of these classes.